Hello and welcome to AI Curious. My name is Jeff Wilser. I am a journalist, I am a human, and I am curious about AI. So I mentioned that surprising human factoid because I do think that in the not too distant future, it will be tricky to determine who is a human and who is not. And that's one of a million reasons I am curious about AI. Here's my take on AI at the moment. I am not quite guzzling the Kool-Aid and convinced it's the best and most important technology of all time. And I'm not predicting it will destroy humanity Skynet style, but I am convinced it's interesting and that it's important and that it will impact all of our lives in surprising ways that we're only now beginning to grapple with. I think it will disrupt virtually every industry except maybe goat herding. And I think it nudges us towards this future sci-fi world that excited me as a kid. So I find AI a bit enthralling, a bit troubling, and a bit creepy. But maybe most of all, I like that AI poses questions. So many questions. These questions involve a mix of technology, economics, philosophy, art, creativity, futurism, politics, business, religion, neuroscience, human progress, ethics, and really what it means to be alive. So this podcast is my attempt to slake this curiosity, and hopefully your own, and to better understand AI. Each week, I'll be speaking to thought leaders and key players in the space, ranging from CEOs to scientists to artists to Hollywood producers. And that brings me, of course, to the pod's very first guests. One of the most obvious impacts of AI is on how we create, how we write, how we draw, how we make music, how we make movies and TV shows. I literally can't think of better authorities on this than some pioneers of AI in Hollywood, the co-founders of Toonstar Studios, John Attanasio and Luisa Huang. Here's what you should know about their background. Both John and Luisa are veteran executives from the studio system. John at DreamWorks and Warner Brothers, and Luisa at Disney and also Warner, where the two of them met. Years ago, they started Toonstar as a way to help creators quickly make studio quality animation. They did that in part using AI. Later, they created several interactive and Web3 powered shows, all animated, with writers from projects like Family Guy and Workaholics. And they're soon launching their next animated series called Fortune. That's a bit of a spoof of the FTX and Sam Bankman-Fried crypto fiasco, starring John Hader from Napoleon Dynamite and TJ Miller from Silicon Valley. Now, I bring up all of these credentials and names not to rattle off an IMDb page, but to underscore these aren't some fringe producers from the tech world. They're very much plugged into the Hollywood system. And they've leveraged AI for virtually all of this, not to replace writers or actors, but to develop more quickly and efficiently. And John recently wrote a guest column for Variety, 4 Ways Hollywood Should Be Using AI. Now, to address the elephant in the room, of course, there is a ton of controversy about AI in Hollywood. AI is a key bone of contention in the writers and actors strike. And as a writer myself, full disclosure, it's no surprise that my sympathies lie with the writers here. I have friends on the picket line as we speak. But one thing I like about this conversation with John and Luisa is they offer a new perspective, a bit of a third perspective that we don't typically see in the discourse. It's not that AI will replace talents or that AI should be banned, but rather that it can be used in creative ways that expands the overall pie. And towards the end of our chat, John even has some concrete suggestions on how actors could earn residuals from AI work. Anyway, that is more than enough preamble. Please enjoy the first episode of AI Curious, my conversation with John Attanasio and Luisa Huang, the co-founders of Toonstar Studios. John, Luisa, welcome, and thank you for being the very first guest of AI Curious.
Thank you for having us. Very excited.
Yes, very excited.
So let's start with your early days in animation. I was surprised to learn that animation is relatively expensive and time-consuming and tough for an indie artist to break into. I thought cartoons, they're fun, they're easy. So talk about how you use AI to help break down barriers to entry and democratize animation for creators.
How do you lower the barrier to entry into animation? I think, as with anything, there are elements of animation that are a little bit more sort of like, a little less like, oh, like here's the art form and just sort of like the basics that you have to do. So a very simple example is lip syncing, right? Artists, like in order for the characters to kind of like look like they're talking, you have to sync their lips to what they're hearing through the voice performances. No one gets into animation saying, I'm dying to lip sync, right? That's not,
Right.
nobody ever said, oh my gosh, I want to get into animation because I want to lip sync. But that is something that, animators spend time doing. And so that's one of the things in which we're like, okay, well, how do you sort of take out some of these basics, blocking and tackling that have to be done in order to have an animation packaged out the door. But at the same time, it's not the thing that you're like, oh yeah, cool, that's great. That's great. Eye blinks, lip syncing, breathing patterns. Like those are not the things that really kind of like give that piece oomph. And so we started looking at how do you use machine learning to be able to animate those pieces so that animators and artists can really focus on like, what is it that really kind of brings things to life? It's expression, it's body language, it's, the blocking and composition.
So you guys have been injecting your projects with AI for like a decade now? Do I have that right?
A little less than, almost.
Yeah, like eight-ish. Yeah, around like 8-ish years. Yeah. Yeah. And no, but yeah, I mean, that's been part of our, that was part of our DNA from when we launched the company because, to Luisa's point, like we really, and again, like the starting point is like when the idea with Toonstar is that, we're focused on building entertainment, franchises through community-driven storytelling, and part of what that means is that we're working with some of the best storytellers around, and then we're using new technologies like AI, like Web3, to really empower the fan communities to come in and create with us and come and participate in new and different ways. And so that sort of, that vision for what, we're building with Toonstar, that, when we launched, to today is the same vision. Now that, some of the tech has changed, some of the ways we can do it have evolved. But it's, when we launched, it was very much focused on Web 2, because that was pre-Web 3. So it was Web 2, and it's like, all right, how are we going to bring these characters to life directly to fans, directly to, communities? And, how are we going to do that in a way that feels like engaging, it feels like relatable, it feels relevant? And our sort of belief was to do that, you've got to rethink the production process, because that means you're going to have to do high quality animation.
Right. So what's the key thing that AI unlocked for you here?
The key is speak quickly. Like you have to do it fast, because you're going to be talking to fans in a way. And like when we first launched, we were doing a lot of stuff in social media. So we were, building characters on, we do stuff on Snapchat. We're doing things on Facebook. We've done a lot of stuff on TikTok. And one of our first characters we launched actually was that became really popular was on Musical.ly, which was the OG TikTok. That actually was the original TikTok before it was sold. And what we did is like we were doing animated content, and we were doing like eps, daily eps, I think, because that's what the community was looking for. Because when you think about social media, the expectation for fans, audiences on social media is daily, sometimes multiple times a day. So if you're going to meet the audiences, the fans, community where they are, our belief was you have to do it in a way that they want, that they expect, which means you're going to have to do it, at least, multiple times a day, in some cases daily, which means you have to do it quickly. And that's where the technology came in, because, without the machine learning AI component, like that's what gives you the speed. And again, like our belief is if you're going direct to fans and direct to communities, then that's a key. That's just a key part of the key part of the experience.
So let's get to the franchises you guys have created. First, the Gimmicks, then Space Junk, and now Fortune, or Fortune 3. How is that pronounced, by the way? Fortune 3? Fortune?
The 3 is silent, is that what we say?
The 3 is silent.
The 3 is silent.
Good...
Yeah, the 3 is silent,
yes.
but it's Fortune. It's Fortune.
Yeah.
It's Fortune. Yeah.
So from my perspective, it looks like AI has played a larger and larger role in each of these 3 shows. So let's walk through them one by one. Kind of give us the quick context for each show, and then how AI was used in each.
Cool. So start with the Gimmicks. So the Gimmicks was our first project, and we call these interactive series. So it was our first interactive series in Web3. We co-produced that with Mila Kunis. And the creative premise is that, it's a world where it's this crew of like sort of washed up kind of has-been wrestlers. And they're, it's this kind of like, it's almost like a little bit of a dysfunctional family comedy. But they're all on they're all on a quest to sort of get back to like relevance, and it's a bit like, it's kind of like an underdog kind of redemption story. And it actually features voices of, a lot of the cast are actually, real wrestlers. Actually, the whole cast, yeah, they're all WWE wrestlers. And it's written by the Daves, who wrote for Family Guy and Star Trek Lower Decks. And so that's like, that's the creative sort of premise.
And John, if I could jump in just for the listeners' benefit so they get the right idea. It is fucking wild and funny and irreverent. And the comedic swings you guys take are kind of amazing. So in a weird way, you're the perfect team to experiment with this new tech, given the risks you're already taking comedically.
No, Jeff, I was going to say thank you. Actually, that's a better pitch than I just gave. So I appreciate it. That's great. But yeah, it's definitely, and that's by design. Like the story is meant to be irreverent. It's it's adult humor. But what we're also, and I think you see this kind of theme in a lot of the series we do, is that we like to do satirical comedy, and in a lot of ways hold up a light or kind of a mirror on the world in terms of what's happening. And I think that's. And part of the reason we do that is because we do, the production, the way we can do it is, it's a kind of like real-time, near-time production, is that we can capitalize on things that are happening, like current events and things that are trending topics, and bring those into the narrative. And so I think that, one, it's funny, but it's also, I think it's just great for sort of like, irreverent kind of poke at making fun of, humans. Because I think we need it. We all need it.
And so, of course, you guys were pretty experimental with things like community-driven storytelling, using new tools like tokens and NFTs and voting. And for listeners out there, I wrote a profile of John and Luisa and Toonstar's use of tokens and Web3 to kind of have this collaborative storytelling where the actual community helps vote on what happens to characters. And they built a very loyal fan base doing that. But one thing I did not realize at the time is how AI was involved in this process. Talk about how Gimmicks leverage AI kind of under the hood.
For the Gimmicks, AI really kind of stayed on the production side, where it was really just kind of, it's a tool that was for the really the production team behind the scenes, and the creators and the writers and the animators. So it was really kind of like the focus for the Gimmicks was really all around the community vote, and that was a big experiment to sort of see, like, okay, what would happen to storytelling and building story arcs while involving the community. And that was really, so I think from a community engagement standpoint, that really, AI didn't really get incorporated into it. So we really got to see kind of blank space, no AI community engagement, like what we could expect to see.
Community facing. Because really like the AI of it for the Gimmicks is what enabled the, because again, like you rewind, that was almost like 2 years ago. We were doing weekly episodes, and that again, like, is unheard of. It's very rare, period, but it was never done in Web3. But it was important to do it that way because we needed to, everybody wanted to be engaged. We had weekly voting. And the only way we could produce weekly episodes and then also respond to what the community was voting was through machine learning. Like our production engine is what enabled us to do that. So that was more of a behind the scenes, under the hood, application for AI. And then moving forward for Space Junk and then for Fortune, now we're taking AI and we're basically using that as a tool and giving it to the community members. So our sort of like new, the moving forward use cases, we're much more putting that tech in the hands of the community itself.
Got it. Let's get to Space Junk. What's the premise, and how was AI sort of taken from beneath the hood and given more of a spotlight?
So so Space Junk is a show that was created by Dominic Russo, who is the creator of one of the creators of Workaholics, and so he came to us with this amazing premise of garbage men in space. He tells a much better story than I do, but he's always been fascinated with garbage, and he lives by the beach, and he always talks about like the fact that he goes to the beach and he sees trash everywhere. And one day he was was listening to the news, and he was horrified to hear that out in space there's actually a ring of trash that's actually surrounding the Earth. And so, much like the ocean, now space is actually, has like millions of pieces of orbiting trash that, sometimes crash onto Earth, that could potentially, that actually does endanger the space station, every so often. And so and it just kind of got him thinking about, well, like what we're gonna need in space, which is, garbage men. And he, that's really kind of like the genesis of that story, and how it all came together. And then as it pertains to the story of like, or how that kind of evolved from the Web3 side, is that when we had the Gimmicks and we had the community wiki as part of the Gimmicks experience, what we saw was that the wiki was complete blank space, right? So you had this experience where people were going in, they were writing their own stories. And one of the things that actually kind of came out of the community that was interesting was that there were people who were like interested in writing a story for their characters, but all they had was like one top line sort of idea. And then they started enlisting the help of other members of the community.
And the blank page is tough, right? As a writer, there's nothing scarier than seeing a blank page.
You're like, how do you even start?
Yes.
And so what we saw was like the folks that had like just this one line idea, they were like, well, how do I fill the page with like, go from that idea to like a page of what I want to say about this character? They started enlisting the help of other creative members and say, okay, can you help me write this? And they just sort of like, kind of were just enlisting other people to kind of like help them do their work and help them write their stories. And, fast forward to Space Junk, we sort of realized that the blank page is scary. And it is very much, especially with folks who aren't professionals, but want to, kind of be a part of the, kind of creative space in the community storytelling aspect. They wanted they wanted a partner, they wanted a tool, they wanted a co-pilot in their creative process. And so that's kind of like how Welbecca, was born. Is like we call her the creative, co-pilot to the experience. And so we brought AI out in the community engagement space as a way to be able to help people with that blank page so that they can have a partner in their process of creation and be able to experiment and safely experiment, so that they can have this sense of accomplishment of like, oh yeah, I created this, yes, with help, but I still created this. So that they, it doesn't become this like very big intimidating thing of like trying to fill a page with ideas. And like, well, what's the right format? How do you even, write a character description? What are the things that I need to think about? So that's really how Welbecca came about.
Yeah. That's a chatbot you're describing, right? Before chatbots were cool, you built a chatbot.
Right. Before chatbots were cool. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly right. Yeah.
And am I correct that you also had an AI-driven character that
yes,
gradually, as the character learns, as the AI learns, the character became a little more and more human throughout the season? Am I getting that right?
No, that's absolutely right. Yeah. And so like, and this is where, I mean, I think, we get giddy about this stuff, but I think this really, like Space Junk, like there's several like really interesting like community facing use cases for AI, versus like in Gimmicks we're talking about, it's like kind of more under the hood and kind of behind the scenes. And so a couple ways for Space Junk. One is that, and thematically, like Welbecca in this story, so there's a character, Thackeray Musk, who's kind of this, I don't know, he's how would you describe him? He's not sort of, he's like antagonist, right? And not a villain, but sort of like
it's a great name. He's got to be, with that name, got to be antagonist for sure.
He's definitely an antagonist. I don't want to use the term villain, but he's kind of like, I don't know. He's antagonist, but maybe quirky, has his own sort of flawed way.
Yeah.
Anyway, Welbecca in the story is his like wellness robot. So in the content itself, in the story world, there's a character, her name's Welbecca. She is a robot and she's a wellness robot. And for us, we're like, okay, well, wouldn't it be interesting to have a robot voiced by a robot, which would be AI? And so that's what we did. So this character, Welbecca, she is actually voiced by AI. So it's a voice performance. And to your point, one of the things and this is like, it's actually a sort of a crazy, I guess, sort of like finding for us, was that when we first started experimenting with the voice, she actually sounded too human. And what we want, and the premise of the creative is, or actually at least the premise of the Welbecca character arc, is that she is more robot. And then as she hangs out with this kind of like crew of like humans, she takes on some of their traits and behaviors, and she becomes more human. So
like Data in Star Trek. That's a Data.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Exactly. So what we needed was like her actually sound more robotic, and then eventually start to sound more human. And the challenge we had is at the beginning, she sounded too human. So we actually had to go in and sort of like tweak to get her to sound more robotic, with the idea that, okay, as the season progresses, she's going to sound more human. But yeah, I mean, she's, fully voiced by AI, which then thematically we felt was really appropriate, because then, well, Becca is your creative co-pilot, and she's the one that helps the community generate characters and generate stories through, written stories, but also, through visuals. And then also, well, Becca is she's basically our character on social media, and all of the social media is also powered by AI. So all the the comments, the responses, that's all generated through AI tech as well. So to us, it's like everything about what Becca is kind of embodying multiple use cases of AI.
Absolutely. And am I right? That's the first time in history that AI has voiced a character in a production?
Yes.
This is true. This is what we've been told.
That is what we've been told
by credible sources.
We're saying it now.
Right.
So let's get to Fortune with the three silent. And for the listeners out there, it's literally spelled Fortune, like fortune, but instead of an E, there's a 3, as in web 3, right?
So tease us the story of Fortune, the tragedy, the comedy of one Sam Bankman-Fried.
Tragedy, comedy,
right?
All of it.
Totally.
All right, your turn.
That's my
turn.
Back
to you.
Back to me. Okay, yeah. So Fortune is story, inspired by, loosely based on, one of the sort of the biggest, galactic
antagonist. I think antagonist and villain in this place is a fair word.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. So loosely based on, the FTX, implosion is probably the best word. And then, sort of the person behind that, Sam Bankman-Fried, and it's inspired by that as sort of a launch point. And it's really again it's we're calling that, I think, a kind of a dysfunctional family comedy, absolutely a satire. But yeah, I think you're going to see the starting point again is, I think, what happened in Web3 with crypto, but it definitely is going to have themes that kind of expand that to other things we see in the there's no shortage of source material for things that we're seeing, whether it's like Twitter or insert other sort of like company. There's a lot to sort of go with there, and you'll see I think themes of sort of like reality distortion, a bit. I think we're saying this is kind of like what South Park meets Silicon Valley. Yeah, it's sort of like South Park meets Silicon Valley. Maybe like a little pepper of like BoJack, maybe a little pepper of BoJack Horseman in there.
Three things I love. I understand this correctly. The timing of this season will coincide likely with the timing of the actual FTX trial. So are you guys planning to go weekly again and be able to incorporate real-time developments? And if there's some wacky, silly thing SBF does that lights up Twitter/X, that could be injected into a plot point for next week?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
So, so in this particular project, this interactive series, we are bringing a show and a game actually as part of it. And definitely the things that are happening in real time are going to inspire some, it's going to inspire some things that will show up manifest in the show and will manifest in the game itself as well.
Yeah. And I think that this is like I think, we're biased obviously, but I think it's another really good example of like the, on the production side, the importance of like the real-time production capabilities that we have, because this is where we can react, because again, we produce so quickly as things happen. And clearly there's like, there's so much more to this story that's going to be coming out in the news cycle. So as news breaks and as new things get revealed, whether it's, just through like journalism or through the trial itself, we can take that and bring it into the episodes. And so we feel like that's going to add a really cool layer of like relevance, relatability. It gives like this real timeliness to it as far as the content goes. And then to Luisa's point, there, we're going to have a game experience, which in the game itself is also powered by AI. It's a simulation gameplay, and the gameplay is going to be chapterized to the episodes, so that as you watch the episodes, there's going to be elements in those episodes that will relate to the gameplay and basically present certain, because the idea is like it's a simulation game, so there's certain decisions that you have to make to progress. Some of it will be luck based, some of it is going to be sort of like ethics based, which is to us kind of important theme in the series. And so it's a combination of those two things, but the content, the episodes are going to inform the gameplay, and they're going to be tied, they're going to be integrated together. And again, the sort of like that real-time production is a key to, enabling us to do that.
One thing that's fascinated me from the beginning of your projects is how you've tried to balance traditional storytelling and the importance of giving the creator and writers agency in telling the story they want to tell with, in the case of Gimmicks, community involvement, right? And you've wanted to give the community a say in things, but also wanted to give the writers agency to have a traditional Aristotelian story arc. I'm guessing AI poses similar calibration questions for you guys. If you think about how much you use AI in these worlds, do you have AI writing stories? So you experimented with having AI in a very clever way. You have the AI be a character, AI voicing a character, and that's so organic to the story. It makes complete sense. I'm sure you've also been thinking about how can we use AI in other respects, to whether in writing or in performance, or putting more spotlight in front of the camera, so to speak. Mm-hmm. How do you think about kind of good use of AI versus bad use of AI? How do you get your arms around that? And maybe give examples of something you've thought about using AI for and realize that doesn't feel right for whatever reason.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's a good question.
Well, I mean, for space junk, I mean, for when we sort of early days, when we started with experimenting with voice and AI, just like this was pre-space junk, kind of pre-production during space junk, and we moved into thinking about like what we would be able to really kind of deploy, and then from an AI standpoint.
This is the scrap concept.
This is
right?
the scrap
Yeah, okay,
concept.
so we're going to start with the scrap concept.
Let's go scraps. Love it.
We're going to give you the scrap first.
Yeah. So, there was just like, hey, well, Becca is AI voice, and it like that completely made sense. So then it was like, well, could we do an entire production using AI and using AI voice performances across the board in all characters? And I think pretty quickly we were like, we started playing around with that idea, and I think pretty quickly we sort of said, no, that's not the right decision, and it's not the right sort of path to go for that production, or really like any production for us. And I think it sort of comes down to this, and I think what ended up happening with Space Junk and ultimately the cast of folks that are in Space Junk, it comes down to there's voice and there's performance, right? So each performer that comes into the character kind of brings. You hire an actor not because they're there to read lines on a piece of paper, right? They're bringing a performance. They really think about the performance. They really think about the character. For example, in the case of Hank from Space Junk, that's voiced by Tony Cavallero, who is part of the Righteous Gemstones, was also School of Rock. Just just amazing, funny guy. And, he talks about when he read the script, the thing that he thought about, he's like, oh my God, a garbage man in space. And he's like, I was born to play this character because I've always wanted to be like Kurt Russell is like his hero. And you can hear him bring that into the performance. And that's completely different than if you, kind of like took the script and put it into an AI voice modulation system and have that output something. Because again, it's like AI would never think, oh, it's Kurt Russell that we want to channel and this is the performance. And so that's really part of it, right? Is it's not just about the words on a piece of paper, because a lot of times when you step into the booth, you go in and you say, okay, well, read this line. And then after you read this line, you go, all right, now give me, 6, 7, 8, 10 different versions, and they'll rip through and they'll sometimes even come up with lines that aren't on the piece of paper. And you're like, that's hysterical. That's the best thing ever. If you watch an episode, if you watch Space Junk, there's a line that he says, if I followed the rules,
which one says,
I wouldn't be, I wouldn't be banned, or I'd still be allowed within 10 feet of a Fogo de Chão. That was not in the script.
But you missed part of what he said. There's more, Jeff. There's more to.
There's more to that.
There's more
Go
to
watch
that.
the episode.
Yeah. I'm not sure what the podcast is rated, but she might have edited part of it.
But it's hysterical, right? So he gets into that character and he just kind of like lets loose. And that's the magic of performances by an actor, that you're going to miss that if you just sort of say, okay, I'm just going to feed it into a voice modulation system, and that's what you kind of come out with.
Well, I think that's it. Yeah, and I was just gonna say, like, I think it's absolutely like the spontaneity of it is like that. It's the thing, that comes outside, because when you think about AI, a lot of the way it works, it is derivative in nature. So it's taking this sort of set of information and data, and then it's mixing and matching and, maybe creating something, totally, and sometimes creating something totally new, but it's still working within this sort of circle of information. And I think it's that spontaneity that, that comes outside of that circle of data, which you don't, at least today, it's harder to get with AI. And I think that's part of the performance thing. And that's why we were like, oh, we love the sound of it. We're like, oh, wouldn't that be cool? Mm-hmm. Like the novelty of an episode that's 100% voiced by AI, or even a season that's 100% voiced by AI, like super interesting idea. But I think when the more we got into it, the reality of that, it's like the performance was suffering. Mm-hmm. And that's where we're like, okay, we gotta sort of pivot from that concept. And then we went down more the path of like, okay, but we could have one character that's fully voiced by AI versus, everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that calibration is important. And of course, every listener here who's an actor, I'm guessing, is feeling chills now at the idea of, whole episode voiced by AI, which of course gets the elephant in the room here of, we're dancing around the third rail in Hollywood right now. As we're recording this, there is still a writers and actors strike. Perhaps by the time this airs, that'll be resolved. My guess is, even if and when it is resolved, the AI issue is not going away. It will be dogging and haunting the space potentially indefinitely with these thorny ethical questions. You guys have both given a ton of thought to how to ethically use AI. John, you wrote a piece for Variety on 4 ways Hollywood could use AI. So how do you think about using this ethically in a way that respects writers and actors? And how would you respond to critics who might not know the nuance and just hear, oh, they're using AI, and think, oh my God, you are betraying every actor and writer, right? How do you wrestle with that tension?
Yeah, I mean, so, I think part of it, I think one of the biggest answers to that is that, so our belief is everything 100% needs to be permission based. And then you're putting the decision in the hands of the performer or the creator, the artist. And, you know, if you believe, hey, like you're a creator, you're an artist, and what you make is yours, then it does feel like it's your decision to then you should be able to make a decision what you want, how you want it to be used. And so that to us feels like the right way to do it. So, you know, at the starting point is it has to be permission based. And then also along with that, then there has to be clear guidelines or information passed to the artist creator of how it's going to be used and in what use cases. And you can certainly build agreements and sort of contracts around like going narrow on a certain use case or doing broader use cases. Again, that could come down to the artist, the creator, and what they're comfortable with. But we believe like that has to be in place. And I think with that, then you can start to think about new revenue streams that this can create for artists, because now start to think about this idea of like, one of the big topics in the strike is residuals. Well, what if there's a world where there's a new kind of residual, and that new kind of residual is like, I do a performance, and then again, it's permission based. I opt in and I give, my consent for it to be used in a certain way, or even be remixed into other things that then produce a different output. But every time that gets used, I get paid for that. So now there's this like really interesting kind of residual model where that almost becomes, residuals that's a type of passive income. And now there's like a new kind of like passive income or a way where, creators and artists could potentially, be in, it's almost like you're in more places at once. Like you're able to do, create more things because, the AI is actually creating it for you. So I think that's something that nobody is really talked about yet, but I think that's a really interesting use case where it could actually expand. Like, I think everyone's worried right now about, contraction and fair enough, like, jobs, people losing jobs and people's, theft. And that's, the theft part of it, 100% that shouldn't happen. But I think, maybe there's a way to think about how can AI expand the pie versus, just shrink it, and how can it create sort of new opportunities.
John, I love that concept in the abstract. Can you give maybe a more concrete example of how that would work? So an actor like gives a performance and then the AI is modeled after that and the actor somehow benefits?
Yeah. You can almost think about it in a way as like music, right? Kind of music does something similar where it's like you create a song and then anywhere that song gets used, it's essentially like a form of licensing. So you've kind of created this like new licensing model, and anywhere your song gets used, you're going to get paid for the use of your song. So could you think of a similar thing where it's like, an actor does a performance, maybe it's their voice, maybe it could be audio, it could be visual, and then it gets used in a certain way, and then maybe it gets remixed into another sort of like spot, or basically you take that actor's performance and you create a new version of whatever it is that the actor didn't do it, but you're taking, they've been trained by the model, and therefore you can create a new performance. And then the actor will get paid on that version. It's almost like a derivative version of their performance, and then they'd get paid on that. And without getting like too sort of like, complicated with it, you could have versions of it where it's just that actor and it's new versions of an original. So think about the original performance, and then you come up with like new versions or iterations of that original performance, or new takes that are created by AI, and they get paid on those new takes. But then also you can think of a world where their performance gets mixed in with other people's performance. And that's a little more, I think, futuristic and gray.
No, I love it. Let's go there. Let's go to the future. On that note, in our last couple of questions here, what do you see as the future evolution of AI in Hollywood? When we get to, let's say, ChatGPT 8.5, what are some ways that Hollywood and storytelling could look different with a further embrace of AI?
Well, I'm excited to think about evolution of storytelling. So when we work with writers, a lot of times writers, kind of are thinking about like one storyline that they're developing. But also as they create characters and as they sort of like start really kind of like pulling on a thread, a world starts emerging, right? So you look at, one of the biggest, Yellowstone, Walking Dead, like all of these amazing franchises that have come, like in television. It's a world, right? They're creating a world. Now, with AI, I think that actually enables writers, showrunners to create a world really much faster in a more expansive way. So as writers are thinking about sort of like just like as they think about their creative process, I can see a world in which now writers like versus coming and saying, okay, hey, I have, like what does a pitch look like today? It's like, well, like I've got a season, it's got 10 episodes, and this is a story arc. The future could be like, listen, I've got this world I'm building out. It's gonna be, like I could see a whole, like if George Lucas were to build, Star Wars all over again, he could do it, much faster. And there'd be all of these iterations of like the different Star Wars lore that could emerge. Yeah. And it's all kind of like powered through this AI system that could generate a lot of these like, thought starters to be like, ooh, that's really interesting. Okay, cool. Okay, well, that's really interesting, subplot too. So a singular writer could start mapping out his world at incredible speeds to say, all right, it's not just one season of 10 episodes. I've got, the prequel, the sequel, all of these different character arcs that have already been developed in the singular engine. And that's the thing that we're pitching is like people can start bringing to life worlds at such a faster rate and also in a way more immersive way, right? Like as we even kind of go forward to being able to create, visual sort of like, metaverse takes on this kind of stuff. It's that's the exciting stuff is like you could see the bringing about of worlds at such a rapid pace, and consumers and people who consume content are going to be, there's just going to be so many more rich stories for them to like jump into.
Yeah, and I mean, so I guess like future, like in 5 years in this, like AI is like an eternity, but like so we, say use that. I mean, I think from a creator standpoint, and we started to touch on it, but I think one thing that can be really interesting, and I think and again from our standpoint, you can probably tell like we look at technology period as like a tool, and it's like how do you help people using technology, and I think we've always approached tech from that standpoint, and I think AI is no different, and it's like how do you use it to in our case like help creators, help fans, and help create like cool story worlds. And I think on the from the creator standpoint, there's this like really interesting, and we were at this like future of AI thing at where was it? It was UTA a couple of months ago, and Will.i.am was speaking about AI, and I thought it was like a really interesting take, and his thing was that and he's a big advocate of AI, and in terms of how it can be applied in music, and he had this idea of like essence, and that's the word he used, and he's like artists have an essence, and if AI is a way to sort of capture your essence and then take that essence and it's your essence. So it's your essence. You can, whether your essence is whether it's, whether you've got a cool sound, you got a cool voice quality, you have an interesting look, you have an amazing performance ability, whatever it is like that, that's your essence. And if you can take your essence and then sort of expand the possibilities of, the way your essence gets used, or creating more art and storytelling, and then also expanding how you can monetize from that. Really, really interesting idea. And he gave an example of who he mixed it. He said it was Michael Jackson. He took his song of Michael Jackson and Prince, and he mixed the three together. And he said it was one of the coolest songs he had ever heard. And he's like, yeah, exactly. And he put it together. He's like, oh my God, it was amazing. And that's according to to Will. And he's like, if I can take my essence and contribute to this like really cool thing gets made, and then I get, and then there has to be some sort of formula. And this is where I think it gets sort of like, futuristic, and you got to figure out how to do this fairly. But you think of your essence almost as like DNA, and the final product has a % of your DNA. Well, if that cool Prince, Michael Jackson, Will I Am song has, 40% Will I Am in it, then he should get compensated 40% of however that song monetizes. So there's this like really cool idea of like, yeah, you can mesh and combine things to create something new and cool, and then get compensated for that. Or you can take your essence and then allow someone to create output with it, and you get compensated for that as well. So maybe people are going to use it for like different takes and different purposes. As long as it's permission based, that seems like a really interesting way to expand the pie. And so I think that's like a really cool use case on the creator side. And then I think on the fan side, just, and we're trying to do this more interesting ways to get to allow fans to participate and, drive the world building. And, I think things like with Welbeca, we've seen, we got, that's given us really good results. Like we got, because again, we talked about, we had that A/B test of the Gimmicks and versus Space Junk, where one was without AI and one with, and we saw close to a 50x conversion rate improvement with Space Junk versus what we saw in Gimmicks, because we had this AI powered, creative co-pilot. So I think, there are just more use cases of AI where it's like, how do you get the fans involved? How do you get them to participate and co-create with you? And we believe that's what, fans and audiences are looking for more and more, especially like younger generations who've grown up with social media, because that's a very, social media inherently is a very active engagement experience where, you're liking, commenting, sharing, remixing, creating, but it's a much more active sort of experience. And I think that's what fans are looking for now.
Final and most important question: where can listeners go to see these shows? Give us the URLs and the plugs.
Sure. Everything Gimmicks related, visit therealgimmicks.com. Space Junk would be spacejunkies.xyz, and Fortune would be Fortune, but with an E, .io.
Oh, so that is an E.
Oh, sorry. Fortune with a 3.
With a 3, yeah.
Fortune with a 3.
I was like, wait.
Oh my God. I was waiting. Fortune with a 3.
I'm confused.
Yes. Fortune with a 3 instead of E.
And
.io.
.io. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I could talk to you guys for hours, but you have shows to go crank out. So let's leave it there. Thank you guys very much for your essence. I enjoyed the conversation. Best of luck on the new shows, and can't wait to watch them soon.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Always so much fun to talk to you.
It was awesome.
Thanks, guys. Take care. And that was AI Curious, episode 1 in the books. Thanks for listening. And it is not lost on me, I have some audio issues to iron out, like the S's. We'll fix that in future shows. I'm sure there's an AI solution somewhere. So thanks for bearing with these early days. If you liked it, please share with a friend, ideally human, but they could be a chatbot. I am not picky. And if you hated it, feel free to forward to an enemy. That works too. Either way, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.